I was dicing onions when 3 heavy knocks shook the front door. Then a voice through the frosted glass said, "Police!" And the kitchen went quiet, like even the air was waiting to see who I was, about to be the problem or the person. And in that split second, I knew somebody had turned a little porch flag into a big story about me. I cracked the door. The late sun pushed a sliver of light across my floor, and there it was, my harmless hummingbird and marigold flag catching a soft breeze like it had no idea it was apparently dangerous. And 2 officers stood straight on the step, with that prepared look people get when a report has already told them what they're walking into. I said hello like my mama taught me, polite and steady. And the older one, Hanley, cleared his throat and said they were following up on a call from our HOA hostile non-compliance disturbance risk. Those were his words. And I felt that little sting behind my ribs, the one you get when the story being told about you has already been printed and stapled before you even speak. Now, I live in Silver Pines in Henderson, Nevada, the kind of neighborhood where lawn edges are sharper than the knives in your drawer and rule binders are thicker than cookbooks. And I'm not a stir-the-pot kind of person. I work long days at a community clinic. I come home to cook and watch the sky get orange, and I like a tiny bit of color on my porch, so I hung a flag with a hummingbird. Nothing political, nothing obscene, just a little joy. You know what I mean. But around here, joy needs a permit if it flutters. The trouble started 4 days earlier, when Darlene Cross, our HOA president, rolled by at 6 in the morning in her Pearl golf cart, like she was patrolling a border checkpoint. Phone up like a body cam. Plastic ruler. In the other hand, measuring the edge of my flower bed. And without even a good morning, she slid a notice toward me. Remove the unapproved decor. By noon, or pay a $500 fine, plus daily penalties of rules. Our rules, she said, with that thin smile people use when the rule makes them tall, and you small. I took a breath, asked her to show me where in the bylaws hummingbirds endangered the community. And she just blinked, pointed her pen at the air, like the words would materialize. Then drove on, like a period at the end of her own sentence. Day 1. Warning taped to the glass. Day 3, final notice in the mailbox. Day 4. A chilly email about further action. And when I wrote back asking for the specific clause, the only answer I got was an auto-reply. Thank you for contacting Silver Pines, which is corporate. For we're not listening. I kept the flag up because sometimes you keep the small thing, so you don't lose the big thing. And my neighbor Jasmine leaned over her fence and whispered that last month they hit a family for a welcome mat that was too distracting. Yeah, that happened. And I laughed the tired way you laugh when it's not funny, but it's too familiar. So cut back to the door, officer's report in hand, be in. A flour-dusted apron? A flag swaying like punctuation, and before I could explain, I heard steps behind me, and my husband Evan came in from the garage, still in uniform, because he'd just gotten off shift. The badge caught the light and changed the temperature of the porch in one heartbeat. Hanley's voice dropped half an octave. Sergeant Monroe, we didn't realize, and everything in me went quiet, because I recognized that pivot the moment a badge gets more credibility than my calm voice in my own doorway. Evan didn't bark. He didn't flex. He just asked what statute they were enforcing on a hummingbird. And the younger officer, Cho, glanced at the flag and then down at his notepad, like he'd seen the absurdity and wasn't sure where to file it. And I said as evenly as I could, please note in your report that no one from the HOA spoke to me. Before calling, no knock, no call, just paper threats and a story that I'm hostile for, minding my stove. They nodded, careful and professional, promise to note the discrepancy, and when the cruiser pulled away and I shut the door, I leaned my back against the wood and let myself feel the fear I'd kept behind my teeth. The truth that if Evan hadn't walked out in uniform, who knows if my calm would have been enough that day. The block swallowed the news like cotton candy, fast and sticky. Blinds lifted, curtains trembled. Hank, the lawn perfectionist, muttered, "Rules are rules," to no one in particular. And Jasmine shot back, "So is decency." The neighborhood Facebook page lit up with blurry photos of my porch like I had committed a crime scene in pastels. And I let it go for an hour. Then sat down and wrote a post. No yelling, just the facts. Police came to my home because of a porch flag. No conversation from the HOA beforehand. If this can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. You know what I mean. And I pressed publish with my hands steady and my heart kicking around like it wanted out. Messages rolled in, some kind, some cowardly. A few sanctimonious ones about community standards, from folks whose trash bins live at the curb 3 extra days. And then Jasmine sent me a ring cam clip from her place that showed my porch all week. HOA rep, no knock. And later that night, an anonymous forward landed in my inbox. A board email with the subject line, "Emphasize disturbance to ensure response." And that little sting behind my ribs turned into a bright, clean anger, the kind you can set a table with. I printed everything and walked into Attorney Samuel Reed's office with a binder labeled Exhibit. Because sometimes theater isn't a stage. It's a folding chair and a paper trail. And he said, I didn't need to sue to be right. I just needed to show the light. Bring the bylaws a page. The ring stills. The police report a note that said no disturbance observed and ask for what is basic. Retract the fine. Put the apology in writing. Stop using power like a hammer. On HOA meeting night, the community room smelled like old AC and scuffed floors. Darlene sat at the head in her sprayed shell of hair with a little wooden gavel. She liked too much, and I stood with my binder not shaking because I was past scared, and squarely into, Dunn said my name and address, and laid Exhibit A. The bylaws highlight that clearly permits decorative flags that aren't political or obscene. Show me where a hummingbird breaks your harmony. Then Exhibit B. The stills of an entire week of no contact. Then Exhibit C. The police report noting exactly what they found. Which is nothing then. Exhibit D. The email subject line read aloud, so it could echo in the vents, emphasize disturbance to ensure response. The room shifted not dramatically, more like a rope letting go a notch, and one board member, Eunice, asked the only question that mattered. Madam President, did you speak to Ms. Monroe? Before calling the police, and Darlene tried to sell context matters. Like context was a coupon. She could slap on inflated behavior, and I nodded and said, I agree. Context is the very thing you erased when you chose scary words over a simple knock. Samuel read the fiduciary duty clause about acting in good faith for the community and the potential consequences when resources are misused. No fire, just a code section rolled out like a sober rug. And Evan stood up in plain clothes and said, His piece, a badge, is not a tool you borrow for petty wins. Not here. Not on my doorstep, and the silence that followed was heavy, but honest. Eunice called for a vote, rescind the fines issue. A written apology to me. Schedule a vote. To remove the president from misconduct, hands went up. Not all, but enough, and Darlene's gavel slipped and clacked hard against the table like it forgot who it worked for. And right there, I stopped the movie in my head before it turned into confetti and champagne, because I've learned that the real victory is smaller and sturdier. The sound of something heavy set down where it belongs. People told me later I won, and I smiled without showing teeth, because winning would be never needing to prove I'm not hostile. In my own kitchen, winning would be the next woman not having to hope her husband gets home in uniform to tilt the story back to truth. So I call this something else. I call it a line drawn in chalk that we all see now, even the folks who like to pretend their hands are clean. Yeah, that happened. In the days after some neighbors softened. Hank looked at my flag one evening and admitted maybe the rules were a little too detailed, which in Silver Pines is the same as an apology, and an email went out to the whole subdivision using pretty words like harmony and cooperation. And I laughed over my sink because I could hear the subtext. Please stop making noise. And I didn't reply. I just watered my geraniums and let the hummingbird do what it does. Zist without paperwork. A week later, the written apology arrived short legal dry, and I slipped it into the exhibit binder, because proof matters. The paper you earn by not bowing matters. And at night, I still think about those knocks and the cooler air that followed when Evan stepped beside me, and I think about the families who don't have that kind of shield. Which is why I'm telling this to you. Plain, because if a hummingbird can be turned into a hazard, what happens when the thing is bigger? You know what I mean. I'll end where the gavel slipped. No party scene. Just a question I want to hang in the space between us, like a porch light that doesn't blink. Where's the line between order and control, between safety and intimidation, between a neighbor and a petty judge with a clipboard? And have you seen it crossed in your own street, your HOA, your apartment office, your kid's school? Drop your story in the comments. Tell me if you think I pushed too hard or not. Nearly enough. Argue with me if you need to. But be honest. And if this hit a nerve, share it. Because somebody out there is about to open their door to a report that uses the word hostile as a shortcut to power. And they need to know they're not the only one.